Look, I'll be honest with you, and I'm always honest, sometimes too honest. I hated Ivan Lendl. Not disliked, hated. There's a difference. I hated the way he walked onto the court like he was clocking into a factory. I hated the blank face. I hated that he never seemed to feel anything. You'd hit the most unbelievable shot of your life, a shot that would make the crowd go crazy, and he'd just reset, bounce the ball, straighten his strings like it never happened. And here's the thing I said about him, the thing everyone remembers. I said I had more talent in my little finger than he had in his entire body. And you know what? I believed it. I still believe it. But talent isn't the point, is it? The point is what you do with what you have. And what Ivan did, what he built, systematically, deliberately, over years, was something I never fully respected until it was too late. He aimed the ball right at me when I came to the net, drove me back to the baseline, and once I was back there playing his game, he owned me. I had the better hands, he had the better plan, and in tennis, the plan wins.
I want to be clear about something. When Ivan Lendl first came on tour, I wasn't worried about him at all. I beat him the first 8 times we played, 8. And I didn't just beat him, I roughed him up. I got in his face. I played the kind of tennis that made guys crack. And he cracked every time. People forget that. They look at what Ivan became and they forget that there was a version of him that couldn't close out a big match to save his life. But here's what I missed. While I was out there winning, he was watching, learning, taking notes like some kind of professor. He figured out exactly what I was doing to him, and he went away and fixed every single piece of it. He rebuilt himself, not just mentally, physically. He came back a completely different player, and when he came back, it wasn't the same person anymore. I remember the first time I felt it, that something had shifted. I did everything I always did. The pressure, the body language, the crowd, none of it touched him. He just stood there and hit the ball harder than anyone had any right to hit it. That's when I knew this was going to be a problem.
You know, people always ask me who was the hardest opponent I ever faced. And I give them the honest answer, Ivan, every time. And they look a little disappointed because they want me to say John or Jimmy or Boris, someone with more personality, I suppose, more theater. But here is the thing about Ivan that nobody quite understood until they actually played him. John could hurt you with brilliance, Jimmy could hurt you with fight, Bjorn could hurt you with patience, but Ivan could simply blow you off the court from the baseline. Pure power, pure topspin, the ball jumping up at your shoulder every single time. That had never existed before him. Not like that. I remember standing there in the middle of a rally thinking, I am doing everything right, my positioning is correct, my shot selection is correct, and I am still losing this point. Every rally felt like quicksand. The longer it went, the deeper you sank. The two of us were probably the most boring players on tour to watch. 2 baseliners grinding for 4.5 hours. Someone once said that if you dropped us both off the top of a building, nobody would care who hit the ground first. They were not entirely wrong, but we cared. Believe me, we cared.
The first time I played Ivan in a major match, I had just won Wimbledon, 17 years old. And I walked onto that court thinking, I am Boris Becker. I beat everyone at the All England Club. I am afraid of nobody. That lasted about 4 games. It was not anything he said. Ivan never said anything. It was not the way he looked at you, he barely looked at you. It was the silence, this complete, total, almost inhuman silence that came off him like cold air. Other players, even the great ones, you could feel something. A nervousness before a big point, a flicker of emotion after a mistake. With Ivan there was nothing. Just the next ball hit harder than the last one. I used to think intimidation in tennis was about presence, about making yourself big. Jimmy had it, John had it in a different way, but Ivan had something else entirely. He did not try to intimidate you. He simply made you feel through the quality of every single shot that your best was not going to be enough. And the strange thing, when I finally beat him at Wimbledon in the final, I did not feel joy. Not immediately, I felt relief, pure relief. Like I had been holding my breath for 2 weeks and somebody finally told me I could stop. That tells you everything about playing Ivan Lendl.
I led the head-to-head against Ivan, more wins than losses across our entire careers. People sometimes bring that up like it is a great achievement. It is, but it does not tell the whole story. Every match against Ivan was a war of attrition. He did not give you anything, not a free point, not a careless shot, not a moment where you felt him drift mentally. With most players, even great ones, there are passages in a match where you sense an opening, a slight drop in intensity, a moment of doubt. With Ivan, those moments simply did not exist. My game was built on taking time away from the opponent, come to the net, finish the point quickly, do not let the rally develop. Against Ivan, that was not a choice, it was a necessity. Because if you stayed at the baseline with him, if you let him settle into that rhythm of his, the heavy ball, the high bounce, the relentless pace, you were finished. It was that simple. What I respected most was his consistency. Not just shot to shot, but week to week, month to month, year to year. He showed up at the same level every single time. No bad days, no off weeks. For a serve and volley player like me, that consistency was the hardest thing to deal with. You could not wait for him to have a bad day. He did not have bad days.
The first time I really understood who Ivan Lendl was, I was 17 years old, and I ran into him in the lobby of a hotel in Atlanta. And I mean that literally. I almost walked into the man. He was 6'2", solid as a wall, and he looked at me the way a professor looks at a freshman who has shown up to the wrong classroom. I was trying to be cool. I was wearing something ridiculous, I'm sure. I said something about a car I wanted to buy, a Winnebago, I think, which tells you everything about where my head was at 17. He gave me exactly one piece of advice, unsolicited, completely practical, and then he walked away. No small talk, no encouragement, no acknowledgement that I was supposed to be the next big thing in tennis. He just moved on to the next item on his schedule. That was the moment I understood something. This man had already decided what he was. He had already built the system, done the work, made the sacrifices, and he had absolutely zero interest in anything that was not directly connected to winning. Later, I found out he had told someone his scouting report on me. 4 words, a forehand and a haircut. I was furious. Then I went out and lost to him again and again. He was not wrong.
Here is what I never gave Ivan enough credit for, and I'll admit it now because I think it's important. He was not a natural, not the way I was a natural, not the way some guys just arrive on tour and the game flows out of them like breathing. Ivan had to build everything. The forehand, yes, he always had that. But the rest of it, the fitness, the mental toughness, the diet, the whole system, he constructed that piece by piece. Year by year, he hired specialists. He worked with a racket technician to make sure every single racket in his bag was strung and weighted to exactly the same specification. He went out and hired the same crew that laid the hardcourt surface at Flushing Meadows and had them build an exact copy at his house in Connecticut so he could practice on the same surface every day. I mean, who does that? Who even thinks of that? I was eating whatever I wanted and relying on talent. He was running experiments on himself like a scientist. And the results were, well, you saw the results, 8 consecutive finals at the US Open. That does not happen by accident. That does not happen on talent alone. He turned himself into a machine. And machines, as I eventually found out, do not choke. I wish I had understood that 20 years earlier.
You want to know what really got under my skin about Ivan? It was not the tennis. I could handle the tennis. I had handled tougher situations than Ivan Lendl on a tennis court. It was the fact that he would not react. See, I had a way of playing it was not just about the shots, it was about the whole package. The energy, the crowd, getting inside your opponent's head and making him feel like the walls were closing in. I did it to everybody. John, Bjorn, guys who were technically better than me on paper, I got to them. You know, because everybody has something. Everybody has a moment where the pressure becomes too much and something cracks. Not Ivan. You could do everything right, play the big points, get the crowd behind you, and believe me, they were always behind me over Ivan, always. You could feel the whole stadium on your side. And he would just stand there at the baseline, bouncing that ball, straightening those strings, reaching into his pocket for that little bag of sawdust he always carried. Sawdust. The man carried sawdust in his pocket during matches to keep his grip dry, because he had thought of everything, every variable controlled. You cannot intimidate a man who has already accounted for every possible thing that could go wrong. That is not a tennis player. That is a different species entirely.
The year 1988, I walked into the US Open final having lost to Ivan 6 times in a row, 6 consecutive matches. And I told myself, nobody beats me 7 times in a row. Nobody. But here is what I did not tell anyone. I was terrified. Not of his forehand, not of his fitness. I had dealt with those things before. What terrified me was his eyes. People talk about Ivan's game, his training, his preparation. Nobody talks about his eyes. When you stood across the net from him during a changeover, during those moments when players usually look away, look at their strings, look at the sky, Ivan looked straight at you. Not aggressively, not with any kind of challenge or emotion, just blankly, completely empty, like you were not a person on the other side of the net, like you were simply the next problem to be solved. That emptiness was more frightening than any amount of aggression. Aggression you can match, emotion you can use against someone, but emptiness, there is nothing to grab onto, nothing to push back against. To beat Ivan that day, I had to stop looking at his eyes and start looking only at the ball. Shrink the whole world down to just that one yellow object. I won. But he took the #1 ranking back within a few months. The emptiness was always still there.
People always want to talk about Wimbledon when they talk about Ivan, about how he never won it, about how that was his great failure, his blind spot, the one thing he could not conquer. I was the one who stopped him in the final, and Pat Cash stopped him the following year. And I want to tell you something that might surprise you. Watching Ivan try to become a serve and volley player was one of the most remarkable things I ever saw in tennis. Not because he was good at it. He was not really, he was built for the baseline, the way a tank is built for open ground. Watching him come to the net was, look, I say this with genuine respect, it was like watching a tank try to dance. Awkward, uncomfortable, wrong in every technical sense. But he did it anyway, every year. He skipped the French Open, his tournament, the one he owned, just to spend more time preparing for Wimbledon. He hired coaches, he studied. He refused to accept that there was something he simply could not have. And that obsession, that absolute refusal to acknowledge his own limitations, that is what stayed with me. Because I realized later that watching Ivan chase Wimbledon taught me something about what it actually means to want something. You do not get to choose your obsessions. They choose you.
Ivan's legacy is not complicated if you think about it clearly. Every player who came after him, the ones who dominated the 1990s, the 2000s, right up to today, they all play a version of Ivan's game. Heavy topspin from the baseline, aggressive positioning, using power and depth to push the opponent further and further behind the court until there is simply nowhere left to go. That is Ivan. That is what he built. When Andre came along, when Pete developed, when the next generation arrived, they were all in different ways working from the same blueprint. They refined it, they added things, but the foundation was Ivan's. We did not think about it in those terms when we were playing him. You do not think about legacy when someone is hitting the ball at your feet at high speed. You think about survival. But looking back now, it is clear. The rest of us, John with his serve and volley, Jimmy with his flat ground strokes, myself at the net, we were the end of something. Ivan was the beginning of something. He was not the most popular player on tour. He was not the one the crowds came to see. But he was the standard, the fixed point that everything else was measured against. We did not play to beat Ivan because we liked him. We played to beat Ivan because until you could, you were not truly the best.
For a long time, I thought Ivan Lendl was everything I did not want to be. I was 17, 18 years old, and I looked at him and saw someone who had traded his entire humanity for a tennis ranking. No personality, no warmth, no fun, just that blank face and that brutal forehand and that relentless, joyless winning. I was going to be the opposite of that. Color, excitement, entertainment. I was going to show the world that tennis could be something alive. And then I started losing to him, and I started watching him more carefully. What I saw when I finally stopped reacting to him and started actually watching was not a machine. It was a man who had made a decision. A complete, total, unconditional decision about what he was willing to sacrifice in order to be the best. The diet, the isolation, the years of work that nobody saw. While I was drinking Mountain Dew and chasing whatever felt good that week, he was running experiments on himself in the dark. I did not become Ivan. That was never going to happen. But somewhere in those losses, something shifted in me. I started understanding that commitment is not about enjoying the process. It is about deciding the outcome matters more than the comfort. You could not hate him for long because deep down you knew that is what it actually takes.